Hey, what's going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. Sorry for the lack of reviews recently. I've been a little bit busy, but I'm going to get back into them, and I'm going to try to be posting 2 reviews a week for at least the next couple of weeks or so. So I look forward to that. But anyway, today we are going to be taking a look at the Sendy Audio Aiya. And this is the same Sendy audio that makes the Aiva. This is A-I-V-A. These are A-I-Y-A, Aiva, Aiya. Kind of a confusing naming scheme, but I digress. But anyway, before we get into this, I want to give a huge shout out to Musicteck for sending these over. They are a retailer for a lot of different brands, Sendy, Cayenne, Unique Melody, different brands like that. So go check them out. Andrew over there is a really nice guy. He sent these over for me to check out, and huge shout out to him. But anyway, I usually don't take you on the unboxing of an item, but this time I think it is worthwhile. So let me move these out of the way for a second. So these can take front and center stage here. Okay. So this is the box that the Aiya comes in. It's a cardboard box here with a little sketch of the IEMs there on the top, and a little blown up diagram of them here on the back. So these are Sendy's Planar IEMs, or in-ear headphones, depending on how you want to look at it. And these are $499, 500 bucks. And they are also open back, which I'll get into that in a second. But anyway, on to the unboxing here. So you pull the lid off like so, and then you pull a little piece of foam out, and this is what you are greeted with. You can see it is a really nice leather case here, encased in some foam. So you go in here, you pull it out like so, and then this is what you have, a really nice kind of a orangey red color leather case. Let's move this out of the way. Okay, so as you can see, you have the Sendy logo here on the top, Aiya Sendy Audio right here on the back. This is from their Beauty series, kind of like a brass rivets and some stitching there. So then you pull open the little tab here on this really nice case, and this is what you were greeted with. These are the Aiya IEMs or IEHs here, and a separate 4.4 millimeter balanced cable that is included here on the top. But I don't have anything that uses 4.4 millimeters, so it has stayed in its case. But if you do have something that uses 4.4 millimeter, that is nice that it is included. So this is a really nice case. However, it is more of a storage case than a usable, like throw it in your bag and use all the time case, which is a little upsetting. And I'll explain why here. Okay, so to take out the Aiya, you have to like unsnap this little thing here, and it actually unsnaps on both sides. And you just pull it out. So you take that little thing out there, and that makes them loose. So I'll sit it down here, and then you have to pull them out. And now here's the problem with this case and why it's not practical to use on a daily basis, is because the wire feeds through this little hole right here. So that means every time you put these in the case or take them out, you have to lift this up and then curl the wire and feed it back through the hole, which is pretty annoying and takes a little while to do. So here, I'll feed it out of the hole. And sometimes it gets a little stuck, and there you go. So there you have the Aiyas out of their case, and you can see them right there. So yeah, that's pretty annoying that you would have to do that every time you want to put them back in the case. It's not really that fast of a process, so that kind of sucks about it. And then also in here you have a little drawstring bag. It says Sendy Audio, and this is with your other tips. and we'll get into the tips a little bit later. Okay, so let's just put the little snapback on here, and then we'll get started talking about the IEMs themselves. Once again, 4.4 millimeter cable, same as the cable that's the 3.5 millimeter, but it does have the Aiva style fish scale cloud pattern, like the 4.4 millimeter cable on the Aiva had, although the 3.5 millimeter is nothing special here. So we'll just put this guy right here. Okay, so let's start with a general overview and build of the Aiya. Okay, so putting the Aiva back down for a second. So these are their Black Beauty series, which is the same series that the Aiva is in, and they are supposedly wood, like a wood look. And once again, they feel kind of plasticky. Like I said, the Aiva felt kind of plasticky. And on the backs, they have a little piece of rubber here, which is for the comfort, which we'll get to in a second. Your tips there, the Sendy logo here with their open back metal grill, MMCX connectors, which are angled, the little plastic piece to keep this part, like to make it hook around your ear, and then a pretty good cable. Not a mind-blowingly good cable like the Aiva came with, but this is a decent IEM cable, although it is a little janky. It is braided, and it's like a brownish color, and it's a nice cable. It's a pretty good stock IEM cable. It's really flexible, which is nice. The 3.5 millimeter is nothing like really pretty like it is on the Aiva or the 4.4 millimeter cable. They didn't do like a bespoke 3.5 millimeter. And just like a little metal Y split, which I wish they would have kind of kept the wood from the Aiva. That would have been like a nice design element to keep, but they didn't. So that's a little general overview of the build. They feel pretty well built. They have a nice weight to them. But all right, let's get on into some specs. Okay, so specs. So these are a planar magnetic driver. They have a driver size of 21 millimeters, a frequency response of 5 to 55,000 hertz, and impedance of 20 ohms, a sensitivity of 116 dB per milliwatt, and they weigh 27 grams. So they are some chunky, heavy boys right here, which we'll get into the weight here in a second when it comes to the comfort. But speaking of power, 20 ohms, 116 dB a milliwatt, really efficient as most IEMs should be. No problem running off a portable player like a little FIO M6 or your phone. So you have absolutely no problem with powering these. Okay, and then moving on to comfort. So the comfort on these is a bit rough. At least for me personally. IEMs I find even more like wildly different. I don't really want to say subjective, but you know what I mean, than headphones in terms of comfort. Like people's opinions of comfort of IEMs is pretty wildly different depending on your ear shape or whatever. For me personally, these are not very comfortable. The first problem is they're heavy and they're big. They kind of remind me of like the Sony IER Z1Rs, which I've heard before. They're just a big, heavy, chunky IEM. And I'm not a real big fan of large IEMs. I like smaller and lighter IEMs. And then the problems continue with the shape. Something about this shape, if you can see it there, just doesn't really fit my ear. And it's a weird fit and it's hard to get in. So they sit in your ear like at this angle, like that. But like to put them in, I have to put them like this, stick it in my ear and then spin it and hope it like grabs. Like this way this shape is supposed to like grab your ear. And for me, it just doesn't fit very well. And it kind of hurts to wear. And then to add to that, this like angled part of the connector here with this like stiff piece, I wear glasses and it just hits my glasses and just makes the fit even weirder. So comfort on these is not very good for me personally. I don't find these very comfortable at all and can't wear them for a long period of time. But like I said, IEMs, your mileage may vary on that, but at least for me personally, not very comfortable. Okay, and before we get into the sound, I just want to talk for a second about this whole open back IEM thing. So I don't know if I really buy into this whole open back IEM. I don't know if I want to say trend, because there's like 3 or 4 of them that I can think of. But this idea of open back IEMs. So these are open back and they're planar. And any of you that have had open back planars know that open back planars leak a lot, typically even more so than dynamics. So yeah, these are no exception to the rule. These leak a good bit. The same with the Audeze iSigns and the Monoprice M300s. And I have to question why you would want this. Because, I mean, they do leak less than a full-sized planar headphone, I'll give you that. But for me personally, I'm not one of those people that likes to use IEMs much at home. I know there's people that pretty much use IEMs exclusively, but I am not one of those people. And I guess maybe if you use IEMs pretty much exclusively at home, you might like these. But for me personally, I'm going to use IEMs when I'm out on the go, and I want that isolation, and I don't want other people hearing my music, bothering people with my music. So I have to question why you would want an open back IEM. Because like I said, and at home, I'm going to use headphones. I'm going to put these on. They're not tangled up in the wire. But yeah, I'm going to be putting on headphones when I'm at home, not IEM. So I kind of have to question why you would want that. Not exclusive to these. I'm not blaming Sendy because they're not the first people to do this. I've also had the Audeze iSign 20s. I owned those a little while ago, but I sold them, and we'll get into those a little bit later when we get into some comparisons. But yeah, I mean, on the go, I would rather use something that's closed. My current daily driver are the FIO FH5s here, which we'll get into these two a little bit in a second. All right, so sound. So I was really excited to hear these after, being pretty much floored by the Aiva here, because the Sendy Aiva is a great headphone. I really enjoy these. So I was, really excited to hear their IEM, and I was expecting, do good things from it. But unfortunately, these don't carry on the hype from the Aiva here. Now, I will admit I'm not the biggest IEM person, but I know enough about sound to know even there's some glaring problems with it. So let's go ahead here and start talking about the frequency response of these. Actually, you know what? Before we talk about frequency response, let's talk about detail real quick. These things have pretty good detail. And that's about all I'm going to say about that, which you'll see here when we talk about the frequency response. But detail-wise, yeah, they're better than your 10s, and I think they're probably a little better than my FIOs. I'm not sure if they're beating these HiFi RE2000s here in detail, but they have decent detail. Okay, so now frequency response. So the bass on these is not quite all the way down to 20. It seems to roll off like around 40 or so. It's not perfectly flat, planar bass. All the way down to 20 hertz, but decently, but it's pretty much flat otherwise. Just a little bit of roll off at 40 hertz. So it's pretty flat after 40, it keeps going along. And then there's this weird hump at like 1.2K. There's this hump there, it's like 3-4 dB hump at 1.2K, which is kind of weird. It's like lower mid shout, which is kind of interesting. And then it quickly dips back off, flattens out again, and peaks back up at about 3.6K, another 3 or 4 dB peak at about 3.6K, which is really strange. And then after that 3.6K peak, it just drops off into oblivion. There is like a shelf down in the mids from like 4 to 7K that's seriously like 7 or 8 dB. I mean, it's some massive hollowed, shelved down mid-range, and I've never heard anything with a mid-range as shelved out as this. Like Audeze mids are dipped down quite a bit, and I'm not a huge fan of the Audeze sound signature, but this is like that times 2. I've never heard mids that are so dipped and so recessed like these are. And I said the Aiva had, a little bit weird mids, and some people said these were out of phase and like too funky for them. You think that was bad? This is like that times like 100. These mids are not that bad. This is not an acceptable mid-range whatsoever. It's just so dipped down. So we go 4 to 7K with basically nothing. There's like nothing there. After that, it peaks back up a little bit after 7K, like 7.1, 7.2K. It comes back up to a normal level, and then another 3 dB peak there. It drops back off at like 7.5K, comes back up again at 8K, like 4 or 5 dB, and it drops back down again at 9K, peaks back up again at 10K, like 3 dB, and then just drops off after that. So yeah, the frequency response of these is not very good to say the least. They just sound so hollow and empty because there's just no mid-range to them whatsoever. And the highs are sibilant and sharp because of these weird peaks, these real sharp, narrow peaks. It's not like, so with treble, if the peaks are not that like sharp, like if it's a more of a broad treble raise, it's not as bad as when there's a really sharp peak. And this is just really sharp peaky treble that just hurts. And then there's the weird shout, and then like the lower and the bottom part of the upper mids, those two peaks there at 1.2 and 3.6K. So yeah, that makes, just the frequency response in these basically unusable. Like I said, the detail is pretty good, and the soundstage is also pretty good because they're open back. It just helps with the stage typically, and these have good stage. However, and then imaging. The imaging's not good because the mids are just gone, so it's hard to distinguish stuff. So the detail is good, but the frequency response is just not usable. Even compared to like, the little tin T2s here that are $50, they're not as detailed, but the frequency response is acceptable and they sound good, where these just unfortunately don't sound good. We definitely would take my Fios here. And these Hi-Fi-Mins are a little weird. You'll see when we get to those, but those are certainly better than these are. And now I know you're going to ask, well, what about tips? Maybe if you change out the tips, that'll fix them. So the tips that are on these are the stock tips, but I think the smallest size of the stock tips. And Sendy includes, a little bag of tips here. And there's a bunch of different types of tips. And I tried all of them, and I'm not going to bore you by telling you what each of them do, because none of them fix these whatsoever. So we're not going to waste 5 minutes explaining what little changes these tips make to them, because it doesn't matter, because it doesn't help at all. I also tried the Symbio tips that are on my little Fios here. I really like these tips. These are my personal favorite tips. I'll link to these. I'm not affiliated with them either. And anyway, so unfortunately the sound on these just doesn't hold up, which is a shame because the Aiva is really good, but the Aiya just doesn't live up to the hype. Okay, so the one thing that everybody's going to ask to compare these two is the Audeze iSign 20s, because the Aiya is $500, the iSign 20s are $600. Although I can't imagine many people are paying $600 for an iSign 20. You can get them for like $350. The pair I had, I got used. I paid like $150 for it. So yeah, the iSign 20s are getting pretty cheap. I'm not a fan of the iSign 20s. If you don't use them without the cipher, they're literally unusable. The frequency response is just terrible. You have to have the cipher cable and an iOS device to get the EQ tweak, or copy the EQ tweak that the cipher has and apply it. But you know what I mean. You have to have that EQ tweak for them to sound even remotely acceptable. And then once you do that, the fit's weird, the comfort's weird, they're too heavy, too large. And yeah, I'm just not a fan of how they sound. Even with the cipher tweak, the bass is kind of weird. I'm not a big fan of the tone. Detail-wise, they're decent. But yeah, I'm just not a big fan of the iSign 20s. However, they are certainly better than these are. So if you do want an open back planar IEM, definitely take a look at the 20s. Oh, and then also real quick of note, this is a little fun fact. Anybody who's had the iSigns knows that when you take them and you put the backs together, they attract each other and they stick together. The Aiya repel each other. So I guess the magnets are in the different orientation because they don't attract, they push each other away, which is kind of interesting compared to the Odysseys. It also feels like a much weaker magnet because the force of these pushing apart is not nearly as strong as the force of the iSigns pulling themselves together. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review of the Sendy Aiya. Wish I could give them a good review, but sadly cannot. But you know, hope this feedback will be helpful to Sendy if they decide to make a second version of them. But anyway, once again, shout out to Musicteck for sending these out. I'll link to them. You can check out some other stuff from them. If you want to buy an Aiva, definitely check them out. You can buy it from them or anything else that they sell. Links to my Twitter, my contact email if you want to send me something. No ears graph for these because the ears doesn't really play well with IEMs, so it's not worthwhile. It's not worth my time or your time to get a graph from the ears. But yeah, anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing the next one. Bye.